We are in the 23rd chapter of the book of Acts during my series, The Facts of Acts February, where I'm going through the entire book of Acts, all 28 chapters for all 28 days of February. Yesterday, where we left off, the commander had found out that Paul was a Roman citizen. So now today, where we're picking up in chapter 23, we are seeing that the commander is trying to figure out why Paul is being accused. He does let him go, and the next day he brings him before the Sanhedrin. So when Paul goes before the Sanhedrin, he opens with saying that he knows that he's lived before God with a clear conscience. This is not received well, and the high priest Ananias then goes to say, you should be hit in the mouth. This is not the same Ananias that had prophesied to Paul previously about God's will for him during his experience on the road to Damascus. This Ananias is actually known for being very, very harsh. So anyway, after he says that Paul should be struck in the mouth, Paul then comes back even snarkier and basically says, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. A whitewashed wall is basically something that looks clean on the outside but is rotten underneath. Of course, this is not received well, and they're immediately like, how dare you insult the high priest? Paul didn't realize that this was the high priest at that point, and so then he apologizes and he quotes scripture about not speaking evil against rulers. Him quoting that scripture shows that Paul does still respect the law, even while calling out hypocrisy. So during all this, Paul is noticing that this council is also made up of Pharisees and Sadducees. So he takes it upon himself to bring up his historical background of being a Pharisee, and that he comes from Pharisees, and that he's standing trial because of the hope of the resurrection. This ends up causing a huge dispute to break out because Sadducees deny resurrection, angels, and spirits, while the Pharisees affirm them. This was strategic. He was doing this on purpose in order to remove the attention from him. Like, even though it's true, and what he said was true, he also knows that this issue will divide the council. So they're arguing, and some Pharisees are even defending Paul. And the argument becomes so intense that the commander is sure that they are literally going to begin to rip Paul limb from limb. So he removes Paul from the situation and he takes him to the barracks. That same night, the Lord actually appears to Paul and he lets him know to take courage and that he must testify in Rome as well. Now, the next morning, a conspiracy begins to form amongst the Jews to kill Paul. They literally take an oath binding themselves from eating or drinking until they kill Paul. More than 40 people were involved in this conspiracy. So they actually go to the chief priest and they share this oath with him. So then they ask the chief priest and the council to go to the Sanhedrin and get them to petition the commander to bring Paul to them. And this is supposed to all be under the pretext that they want to ask Paul more questions and get more information from Paul. It's all lies. It's a complete ruse to lure Paul so that way they can kill him on his way to the Sanhedrin. Paul's nephew ends up hearing this entire thing and he runs to the barracks and he tells Paul exactly what they're planning. Paul then calls over the centurion and he tells him that his nephew needs to speak with the commander. So the centurion takes Paul's nephew to speak with the commander about this plot against Paul. He asks him to not give in to their plan. He says that they are ready and waiting at his consent. So the commander dismisses Paul's nephew and tells him to not tell anybody what he has just shared with him. So now we find out at the end of chapter 23 that the commander goes forth and arranges an entire escort just for Paul. This is to make sure Paul safely gets to Caesarea that night. God is ensuring that Paul is completely protected. This escort consisted of like 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen. God made sure that he essentially had a small cavalry protecting him to get him to Rome. And God used all this through Paul's value as a Roman citizen. So Paul is then sent to Caesarea with a letter from the commander to Governor Felix. And this letter explains the entire situation. He shares that he rescued Paul after learning about his citizenship and that the accusations come from a religious dispute and they are not worthy of imprisonment or death. And he also mentions in the letter that he's sending Paul to Felix due to the plot of Paul's death. So the soldiers escort Paul as far as Antipatris, and the cavalry continues with him all the way up into Caesarea. Paul is then presented to the governor. The governor reads the letter and he asks Paul where he's from, and he learns that Paul is from Cilicia, so he agrees to hear the case once the accusers arrive. Paul is then kept guard in Herod's palace, and this is to wait out until the hearing. So that is chapter 23. A lot is going on, but Paul's trial before Felix will be tomorrow, day 24, and I will see you all then.